I'm Erica Hollingsworth, and you're listening to the F1 podcast.
That is four in a row, Max. Four in a row. Congratulations.
Max Verstappen, you are a four-time world champion. That is a phenomenal achievement.
Oh my God, man, what a season. 4 times. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Thank you to everyone. I mean, it was a little bit more difficult than last year, but we pulled through and we gave it all. Thank you so much, guys.
Max Verstappen has added his name to F1 history by becoming a 4-time world champion. The 27-year-old Dutch driver now joins Fangio, Michael Schumacher, Sebastian Vettel, Hamilton, in top of the greats of Formula One. And, there's still a couple more races to go, and the constructors is still very open. I'm here with Erica and Andrew, and this is the F1 podcast. Happy Tuesday. How y'all doing this fine Tuesday evening?
We're vibing.
Max Verstappen. We're gonna play that in the club all night, baby.
Do a barrel roll.
Finally, it's interesting to think of how this year came about with how he started with, winning a number of races. And then you had the emergence of McLaren. Then you had Ferrari come into the mix. Then you had Mercedes come into the mix. Just play spoiler. I mean, think about it. Like Max won 8 races. Carlos Sainz won 3 races. Lando Norris won 3 races. Oh, sorry. Charles Leclerc won 3 races. Oscar Piastri won 2. George and Mercedes win 2 each. I guess the question is this his most impressive victory or driver's championship yet?
I'd say that this was a very different type of championship for Max. I struggle because this first one we had that epic battle between Lewis and himself throughout the course of the season, but this was a tough year where we kind of thought he was going to lose it, and he wasn't in the running the whole time. So it was one where it really kind of came down to the wire. We only have 2 other races left in the season, and there was a chance around the midway point that we might not even see this happen for the Dutch driver. So to me, I'd say this is definitely one of his top 2, if not the top of his 4 wins so far.
Yeah, I make the argument that this is his greatest championship of the 4. In his first, he had, let's say equal machinery with Mercedes in a sense, right? Over the course of the season, which led to the final showcase, final showdown in Abu Dhabi there, with Lewis. And obviously there's controversy. And for those Hamilton fans that are going to complain that it's his 3rd championship in a row and not his 4th, pour some wine, get some cheese, pour the wine, and forget about it, all right? It's over. Don't worry about it. But I would say this is probably his most impressive to date because he literally had the 4th fastest car since Spain. And I know he built himself quite a big lead at the start of the season, but he had to fend off the likes of McLaren, the likes of Mercedes, and the likes of Ferrari, and really had to maximize every opportunity in the 4th fastest car, which he was able to, I think, to do so for the majority of these races so that Lando wouldn't, continue to close the gap by a strong margin. It also helped that we had teams like Mercedes, McLaren, and Ferrari both fumble the bag in some cases, right? Lots of missed opportunities and points, but sometimes you need to be lucky in order to win these types of championships, considering when you're the 4th fastest car. I would say that Brazil is the greatest drive of his entire life, which then led to the greatest championship of his entire life, because 4 in a row, like John, you just mentioned the names that have done only 4 in a row. That is an elite company of drivers. And now Max gets to etch himself into that elite company.
And let's first take a thought about the 4 championships that he's had. He went against Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes in 2021, Charles Leclerc in 2022, Sergio Perez to a certain extent in 2023. And then I guess this year would probably be Lando Norris as his top. Every year it's been a new kind of driver who's challenged him. And I'm a little scared about even next year because like if he can get that fifth title and the only I think driver who's able to pull off five Pete is Michael Schumacher. And where they're probably going to be in the constructors, it's going to be it might be scary. Whatever, like if they have to spend less time in the wind tunnel and less cash compared to what they do, and some of the drives that he's had to pull off, and even think about it this year, Sergio Perez was nowhere to be found to protect him at certain points of the year, so it's made his this year even more challenging for himself. And I mean, Max versus the world, I guess.
And we've also got so much young talent coming up the ranks. Like this was truly the first year that we could see Oscar Piastri kind of fighting and jockeying for position, taking home a couple wins. And I'm curious to see if McLaren can keep this kind of momentum. Will he be the one that's challenging Max next year at the front of the grid? And as you said, will they even be at the front of the grid? Because they were so off base with parts of the car at this point in the year. So I think it raises some interesting questions about 2025, including everyone having their sights on the new regulations coming in 2026. It could shake things up a little bit, as it were.
Well, to Sergio's kind of defensive benefit, his lackluster performances are going to give Red Bull maybe some opportunities to gain more wind tunnel time for development in the next season's car, right? But yeah, like Richie, to your point, for the last, I want to say like 12, 13 rounds, Max has been a one-man band for the majority of the time. I mean, he's had no help, I would say, from Sergio. So I think that's what also makes it very impressive as well, as that he's been able to maneuver through the field against teams that can do two driver strategies against him to knock him down and reduce points. Plus, we're in the midst of the greatest, I would say, F1 season overall in terms of multiple winners, in terms of multiple teams competing for championships. Right? I would say this is above 2010 season when you had four racers going into Abu Dhabi to figure out who could win that final season, Vettel winning that and being his first championship. But I think when we look back on the grand scheme of things in a few years' time, when Max has moved on from the sport and we assess his championships, I'm still going to say this is the best one of the four to date. And, Red Bull is very concerned about their 2025 car in terms of where their development is. So I really don't think they're going to be at the top of the grid next season. So I think we're going to have a big change in terms of what 2025's landscape will be. So the fact that he was able to secure four in a row is good. I just don't know if it's going to happen again next season.
I think time will tell, and especially now, I mean, we got two more races to go in the season, and we have a really competitive fight for the constructors between Ferrari and McLaren. And we'll talk a little bit about what happened in Las Vegas this weekend, but we want to talk about teams, guys.
Mm-hmm.
We finally have an 11th team. Do you believe it?
It's been a while.
So
oh boy, I have so many feelings. Won't it, like this is going to be so interesting. So the announcement, for those who have missed it, it's GM joining in 2026, which is exciting. I know a lot of folks, especially Liberty Media, pushing for more American representation in the sport. And they're joining not only as a team, but as an engine supplier, which is going to be huge, in my opinion. We're also going to have Audi entering the game at this point in time. But I think what was interesting is that, as we're kind of talking about executives, there's a familiar name that may have been churned and spurned earlier this year appearing in the mix, eh?
I guess, yeah. So I'm going to try to summarize this as much as I can. So for those that don't know, on Monday, came out with the announcement. The Andretti family is somewhat involved. So TG Global, they're the controllers of Andretti Global and are the partners with the GM-led F1 team. And it's reported that Mario Andretti will be a director on the team's board, and Dan Horace from Group 1001 is TG Global CEO. And so I'm just going to read a quick couple of quotes here. Michael Andretti, the Cadillac F1 team is made up of a strong group of people that have worked tirelessly to build an American works team. I'm very proud of the hard work they have put in and congratulate all those involved with this momentous next step. I'll be cheering for you. And then Mario Andretti has said, I feel very lucky that I've been able to stick around for this long and do what I love for so long. And the idea that the Cadillac F1 team wants me around, I'll help out where I can as a non-executive role, very clear, non-executive role with the team, not involved in day-to-day operations because I don't want a job, but offering advice, inspiration, friendship, anywhere I can. I am beyond fortunate. I appreciate you guys staying with me here. That's a lot of words and a lot of quotes, and I'm not going to go through all the other quotes, but I think there was, for those that don't know, there's been discussions of the Andretti family wanting to come back as an 11 team, and they got rejected. I don't know where, maybe it was a little bit of politics, or they wanted them to come right at 2026 rather than at 2028. And it also, we've talked about this, Erica, is the engine, wanting that to come right at 2026. So with all this information, ironically, right after the Las Vegas Grand Prix, how do we feel that 11 team is now coming to the grid? And the Andretti family, while it's not their name per se, the Cadillac F1, well, they're going to have to figure out a name change. How do we feel about this?
I think it's a long time coming for an 11th team, in my opinion, because we had an 11th team previous, but always the case, I think, where it was financially were the issues in terms of, HRT, catering back in the day, right? Not being able to be sustainable as part of a constructor team with financing. I think where F1 learned, quote unquote, from their mistakes are you want to bring new teams in that have a significant financial backing and they're going to bring additional value, I guess, into the sport now. And I believe that, when they start introducing their own version of engines in 2028, that was the value is added. And that was probably the selling point with regards to the team. They, now that they can bring an additional engine supplier involved, they'll make, I think, believe 6 engine suppliers for 2028 onward. Being like Audi, Red Bull / Ford. We have, Mercedes. You'd have Ferrari. You would also have, or maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's going to be just 5. No, maybe 5 or 6. Anyways, you have those engine works teams that, teams can now pull for. So that's where the value add is going to be brought in. And then when you have a name like the Andretti family coming in to back you in that case, I think that's where the tipping point came in for the 11th team. So good on the Andretti family to keep pushing on forward with it, even though it wasn't their own family team name. They can be part of the executive team going with GM / Cadillac F1.
I think one of the other things that'll be interesting is since Drive to Survive, we've got so many new fans to the sport who might not remember what F1 was like when we used to have more than 10 teams and 20 cars on the grid. So for those who aren't familiar, there is an article, I believe, in their rule book that states it's a maximum of 26 cars on the grid. So we'll be moving to 22. I believe the last time we had more than 20 was, I think, around 2012. We had 24 cars on the grid at that point in time. But I mean, even me personally, I have a hard time remembering what that was like. Was there worse traffic? How did that impact qualifying and some of the other rules and regulations that have been brought in, having only had 20 cars for so long? So I personally am excited to see not just the added competition and having new engine suppliers and a bit more diversity there, but I genuinely think it'll reshape parts of the sport that folks haven't considered in a long time. Like, we've been complaining about how big the cars are getting and how that impacts racing. If you have more cars on the grid, maybe the next time they do a regulation change after 2026, the cars will then get smaller again if we continue to have more than that 20 on the grid. So very excited to see what comes of it.
I think I'll add to, now this adds 2 more spots on the grid for drivers. We've talked about that how already it was so competitive to find a seat. I think there's still 1 more seat left that to be filled for next year. But yeah, now given it, I think they're already talking about if Mick Schumacher goes into the Cadillac team. We're getting some comments on our Instagram that there's now going to be a Detroit Grand Prix. I don't know.
Please do it. I want it so bad. I'm a Lions fan. I'd love this Grand Prix as well. This is the one time I will get behind more American races. Put one in Detroit.
Well, Indy already has a Detroit Grand Prix, and they drive throughout the streets there too. So I bet if they can get that track up to FIA standards for F1 racing, it only brings like addition. I think it'd be good to have an additional economic driver in Detroit like F1. But I hope, the FIA don't cock it up like they always do going to America, making it so expensive. And that's not what you do in a blue collar town, let's say like Detroit, in my opinion, right? In that
No,
case.
they'll tell you to kick rocks and go back home if that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
This is the city's on the upswing, but I don't think anyone has the appetite for like Miami 2.0 or Vegas 2.0 or anything like
So,
that.
something tells me I don't think there's going to be a fake marina in Detroit. Maybe like I don't know, bunch of
There might
cars.
be a
A fake
manufacturing
river.
line on the side. I don't, yeah, a fake river.
But from what I hear, or the rumors have it, is that Colton Herta is kind of the front runner to be one of the drivers for Cadillac in 2026. And I think that'll be good to bring, if we have an American Works car, we can start bridging the gap between IndyCar and F1 potentially and seeing like if some of these teams that from Indy or some of these drivers in Indy that are bringing up the ranks, can they compete in Formula One too? And I think that would be good. It'd be great to see Herta. Maybe we get, maybe Pato O'Ward jump ship from McLaren and kind of heads that way too. I think
Mhm.
that would be a dynamite powerhouse to start off with an F1.
Well, and I guess my question too, with Andretti's involvement, do you think that they have anyone on their side of the world they might be pushing or kind of getting ready to take one of those seats once this GM Cadillac team is on the grid? Do any names come to mind?
I hope it's not Logan Sargent.
True.
Is there like
Fair.
a an Andretti son somewhere to appear out of nowhere? Like I don't know, that's like all kidding aside, but yeah, that's actually a good point on Colton Herta. Like I don't know if it's like yeah, as I mentioned, you had Mick Schumacher being discussed, and then I'm just trying to think on the F2 world if there's like any American drivers left that maybe you do both American drivers for this and just try to build in that, build in that culture or build in that like relationship for and try to dig more into the American culture.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious because, as you mentioned, like there's Marco Andretti who races for them right now. And but he's on the older side versus some of the younger guys like Colton Herta, obviously one of the young bucks they might try to bring in, but Kyle Kirkwood is also relatively young. He'd be older coming into the sport, but we've seen other people do that or make a return after a few years away. So I'm curious to see. He's also a Floridian, so he may not be Logan Sargent, but you'll get a bit of your like rah America kind of vibes in there. So
We just don't need another terrible pay driver,
fair. That is very fair.
So let's talk Vegas.
baby.
The pig track. I don't know how we're going to start here, but something about Mercedes, and when it's cold, they do very well. Here's just some stats. It was 15 degrees Celsius in Vegas. George Russell won. It was 20 degrees in Belgium. Lewis Hamilton won. It was 17 for the British Grand Prix. Mercedes won. It was okay. This may be an outlier, but it was 27 degrees in Austria. George Russell won, but clearly, I guess something about the Mercedes and cold temperatures they do very well at, and they're able to maintain their tires compared to other teams. But and also like Lewis Hamilton looked really good from P10 to P2. But yeah, I guess let's open it up. What really stood out this weekend in Viva Las Vegas?
I think starting with qualifying, it was pretty entertaining, and we saw some folks end up in places on the grid we might not have expected them to. Like Pierre Gasly looked pretty good in that Alpine. I mean, we saw them get that double podium 2-3 a little while ago to the shock of everyone in the world, I'm fairly certain. And you know what, as much as he couldn't keep the place, it was definitely great to see maybe a little bit more surprise and pressure as we end the season being put on some of these other teams used to being at the front.
And I think we
Uh,
knew. Oh, go ahead, Andrew.
no, you go ahead. Go ahead, John.
Well, I was gonna say like the motor focus was gonna be on like this weekend, particularly the track like a Ferrari or McLaren. And yeah, George Russell comes out of nowhere and tops it by like under hundreds of a second. And even you kind of saw a little bit about like how is strategy going to be played on a track where it's going to be much colder, and if it's going to be a one stopper or a two stopper here. But also, like, what happened to Lance Stroll's radio is a question.
Oh, Didn't he lose it on like lap one or something and basically just had to guess when he was coming into the pit
Yeah, I'll
lanes?
turn that to
Yeah,
Andrew. I think you wanted to talk
literally
about that.
like lost it on lap one, and he's trying to signal to his team about when to come in. And I mean, like that's crazy enough as it is to begin with. Uh, so honestly, great on him just to be able to finish the race and gain points, but not even having communications with your own team. I can only imagine how frustrating that was for Lance in the time when he's probably screaming into his radio saying, trying to call back, and he's like literally his radio comms are done for the time. And I guess it's like I have a feeling, utilizing the cameras around, they could have like done like maybe hand signals or hand gestures in terms of like when to come in, sort of idea, right? Like as in like I'm going in now, or like fuck you guys, I'm going out too. Sort of like-
Kind of like a little who's on third scenario
Yeah,
going.
exactly.
It's better
But
than you were picturing the cameras. I was picturing him just zooming by being like, hey, coming in, tires.
I love it. Absolutely, that's what he was doing. Like, yeah, what are you gonna do? What are you gonna do?
I mean, there's not really much you can do. You just kind of have to grin and bear it at that point because it's not like you can take a slightly longer pit like you would to replace a front wing or something like that, right? Like you're done. You're done with the radio at that point, and you either have to decide if you're going to keep racing or if you're going to retire.
Well, I mean, at least he did have radio. There were two instances in the race between Sainz and Ocon when their team weren't even in the pit box when they were called in. Like, how is that even possible?
Like
Is
you
everyone
would,
too busy in the back playing blackjack with, or doing roulette? And they're like, oh shit, gotta go now. Bye.
it just kind of like I get it's a 10 p.m. race, but like Andiamo, like where's the espresso? Wake the team up. Like they need to go. Yeah, so let's talk
They were
about
too
that.
busy at Tao the night before, like clubbing it up. You know what I mean?
Well,
They
didn't
got
they?
to pump the pit with oxygen the way they do the casinos to keep everyone going.
And cigarette smoke too.
And cigarette smoke, yes.
That's the key.
What would this be without the faint trace of nicotine in the
No,
background?
no,
Although,
of course.
it's Ferrari, they're
And
telling
then
the
in the
fight
background, they
already.
got the do Max Verstappen do. Just banging it. Boom, 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 boom. But yeah,
Okay.
all cases, Ferrari, figure your shit out. Because you gave up a lot of potential points here too. I know you finished 3-4. You could have finished second, gained an additional few points. I don't know, but errors in sign strategy. And also, John, I want to hear your take. What is up with Charles Leclerc bickering on the radio like a
Ooh.
school kid, man? Oh my God.
Spicy.
I think
Spicy.
I wonder if he doesn't even care about the constructors at this point. He just wants the season done. I honestly, like that was just like, yeah, I felt like you need to go to the detention room, and Fred Vasseur is like, we'll discuss it when we get back. And I was like, ooh, you're in trouble, son.
Well, what I understand by Charles is why isn't he have a big, more of like an FU attitude towards when it happens? He just, instead of like, he's more very passive in those types of moments. Get aggressive, get ahead of your teammate, man. I mean, like fight him, sort
Well,
of
and
idea. Like stand your ground.
well, and there's been moments like I talked about. There's been moments this season like Carlos has like not been afraid to push in and say like, doesn't matter if I'm leaving this year, like I'm still gonna get as much podiums. I'm gonna still try to get as much as possible. Yeah, it was just kind of was very comical at a certain span, and like this was like a weekend. If they really cared about the constructors, like yeah, they talked about how when he had to go in and then they had to go in and the timing, and then you just heard the bickering. I was just like, what the hell is this
I
going
mean,
on?
like, because I know like Hamilton was rapid this weekend, going P10 to P2, but with the correct strategy, I have a feeling that you guys could have been P2, P3, right? George wasn't losing that race whatsoever. He was
No.
just unbelievable out of the blocks, and he converted his pole. Lando, take notes, but in
It's true.
essence could have been P2, P3 on a McLaren team that finished P5, P6 around there, and only 24 points out with 2 races to go in a sprint race, but again, critical points going into these last 2 weekends.
I think this truly was the weekend of radios, though, because we had Lance with the lack thereof, Ferrari and Alpine with the miscommunications, Spicy Charles going, We've told him not to put pressure on you, and then tell him in Spanish. And then we've got Max very emotional and somber about his win, and Charles doing his best Fred Flintstone impression over on his radio after his win. Truly just covering any and all bases as it pertains to the radio on this weekend.
Also, just a couple of highlights there too. You had Alex Albon, who at one point got up to 10th. He suffered a cooling issue, forcing him to retire. And then what was it? Was it Pierre Gasly had issues with his engine, and then so he crapped out. And then I don't know. Like there was a moment where Franco Colapinto almost didn't even start. I think the race because he crashed yet again.
Oh my God. And that was another massive crash that like caused a 20-minute red flag in Q3. Well, good on also Haas this week, and I believe they've pushed into P6 now in the Constructors' Championship over or VCARB, and that is huge. Again, for money, for points, for shoving it in my face during my preseason predictions about how I didn't think they were going to
our preseason predictions are so bad at this point.
Oh.
Like,
to be fair, who could have seen any of this coming? Like, if you had told me McLaren would be fighting for the Constructors' Championship back in February, I would have told you were off your rocker. And I feel like I've said that multiple times in the last couple of weeks, but I don't think any of us could have foreseen this season going down the way it did.
is Sauber going to get a point?
No,
absolutely not.
If I'm betting on it, I'm betting no.
They might get negative points for how bad they are.
Think about it. Third time the Drivers' Championship has been decided in Vegas, previously in 1981 and 1982, I think that was Caesar's Palace's parking lot. But it looked like Max Verstappen, I don't know if we want to talk about it, but he looked like he was enjoying himself in the interviews. And by the end,
dude was a vibe. He was a vibe. It was awesome in his element there.
How did he do it?
Just progressively more inebriated.
I just love how he shit talked Zach Brown right on Sky Sports. That was hilarious, with his Heineken, and then he had switched to gin and tonic because he ran out of beer.
My other favorite is when he was in the Rolls Royce and he was nerding out over everything inside the car, and he's just like flipping things down, and like Lewis knows where the mirrors are, and Max is like, "Oh, what?" And he's like, pulling everything out. Like he was just, you can tell that this championship, I think, meant as much or more to him than any of the others, which I think, to your point, Clary, just kind of buttons that it's truly like the best one that he's had so far, because he really did have to work for it a little bit harder. But my God, that man was a vibe.
I don't know if you saw this just really quickly. We had a couple of people that were at, in Vegas at the race. And also there was some reporters that were talking about like, he was doing his final round interviews. He's like, yeah, I just ran out of beer. I'm perched. I need a beer right now.
You know what? He's honest, and I don't think we'll ever say otherwise.
And also, I just wanted to first say, as we continue to talk about the Las Vegas Grand Prix, just want to say thank you to everybody who came out to Trinity Common at 1 a.m. on a Saturday. I think we had about like 20 people. So big shout outs to you guys. Kudos to them staying there till 3 a.m. to watch the race. It was pretty remarkable. And hey, what better way to win your Drivers' Championship than in Vegas?
Exactly.
That's Vegas, baby.
Also, like Sergio Perez at least participated in the I wouldn't want to call it the Drivers' Championship with him. So that was nice to see, at least despite I know he's had a difficult year. He was there to support Max. All right. I guess okay, so let's jump into Qatar very quickly. I don't think Ferrari's going to look really good in Qatar. And two hot tracks. I'm kind of favoring McLaren at this point. But I'm curious to see how things are going to play out for the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I'm hoping we see some good points from McLaren, just because now that we're sitting 20 some odd points ahead of Ferrari, I'd like to keep that momentum going through to the end here. And if we can't win the World Drivers' Championship, at least take the Constructors home. I do think this is a track that they're well suited for, but honestly, after the last few weeks, it's a toss-up. People who you would expect to do well in some places kind of falter. Strategy has been lacking from a lot of people for a while now. And so I'm not fully confident that they'll pull off a dub or a podium here. I'd like them to, and that's what I'll be keeping my eyes out for.
And what about
At
you,
least,
Andrew?
oh, at least this weekend it'll only be, I think, like 24, 25 degrees Celsius in Doha, as opposed to like 50 as it was last year. I might be wrong. Let me just double check the weather network. So this is the cutting edge technology that we use, by the way, people.
We
Yeah,
love a live
25
fact
during the
check.
day, 19 at night Celsius. For you Fahrenheiters, that would be what? 68 degrees at night for for the race time temperature. So I think in that case, maybe if it's that cold, if the track's cold and maybe a little higher, then you don't know, Richie. Ferrari might have the edge. It's just a matter of getting the strategies on point. There is a sprint race too, so there's key points up for grabs there as well. And I don't know. I'm just excited to see how this final. I'm just happy that the final two races will still mean something in terms of a championship by the end of it.
Yeah, because compared to last year, I think when Max won it, it was just became a snooze fest towards. I mean, it was already slowly becoming like that last year. But yeah, really excited to see who's going to win the constructors. Again, congratulations to Max Verstappen, four-time F1 driver champion and your 2024 drivers champion. Tune into next week while we'll cover the Qatar Grand Prix. Still a lot to go for in the constructors between Ferrari and McLaren, and also in the midfield battle between Vicart, Haas, Alpine, Williams, and I don't know if Mercedes. No, I don't know if Mercedes can't jump that far. Tune into next week, and we'll talk all about this. Make sure to follow us on all of our social media channels, and go to our link tree where you can access all of them. And thank you, Erica and Andrew, once again. And tune in next week. We'll cover the Qatar Grand Prix. Thanks, everyone.
Max Verstappen.